He has 9 minutes 30 seconds remaining to speak should he wish to take it. Chris,
yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We did have some concluding remarks as we started on the third reading, during which time I mentioned the contribution made by various members of the opposition to the debate. And I seem to remember saying that Shane Jones had given a good speech. Perhaps I should amend that to quite good, perhaps goodish. But certainly, when you listen to the speakers on the other side, I really wondered if we were talking about the same bill, Mr. Speaker, because, goodness me, it was as if we're introducing Apocalypse 3. It isn't that bad. I stand to speak on the third reading of the Local Government Act 2002 Amendment Bill. It is all good, and I'm excited that this bill is about to become law. I haven't heard very many problems associated with it coming from councils, coming from councillors. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, that I wonder what sort of council and councillors do the members on the other side of the House have in their territories.
Just to ask the member to pause a little bit. There's a lot of noise in the chamber. For those people who are having noisy conversations and want to continue them, please move to the lobbies. And others who are just having a noisy conversation, desist. And we now listen to Chris Ockenbold.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So I was saying, this is a good bill. But I must say, I wonder what sort of councils and councillors the members on the other side of the House have in their localities. I revere the good citizens of Tasman, Bulla, Grey District and Westland who stand for their councils and do a thoroughly good job representing the people. They are quite capable of making choices. They are quite capable of making good decisions. Again, this is a good bill. We heard a lot about the dangers of giving them the options of having water conducted by private services. There is no compulsion for any council to have to do that. It's not a compulsory thing. If they choose to, they can choose to. That's why the bill's been put forward in the way it is. It ain't compulsory and it ain't complicated. I'm a bit surprised, Mr. Speaker, again, that there's been scant reference to smaller communities from the other side. They seem to have a huge preoccupation with Auckland. There are other places in the country. And I know that in the small community I live in Moana, down on the west coast, we actually each have our own private water supply because there is no centrally reticulated water system, so we have our own private water supplies. But thinking about that further, and in conversation with some members of the committee, it's astonishing when you think around small communities just how many of the facilities, and I'm sure Mr. Jones is aware of this in his part of the country, just how dependent small communities are on the privately provided infrastructure to keep themselves going. Those who visit our locality are amazed just how many local facilities have been put in place by members of the community or working groups and that sort of thing. In this, just looking at what the bill achieves, how it achieves what it sets out to do, it makes councils more accountable to their ratepayers, and it does this by providing ratepayers with better information through a provision of financial strategy, the pre-election report, plain English financial reporting, and disclosure of infrastructure service information and performance measures. Standard performance measures, Mr. Speaker, will be for 5 key infrastructure activities: water supply, sewerage, treatment and disposal of sewage, stormwater drainage, flood protection and control works, and the provision of roads and footpaths. This is a great package that will enable ratepayers to make comparisons of costs, funding arrangements and service performance standards. Plain English financial reporting will mean that ratepayers can clearly understand the financial situation and dealings of councils without it in any way being obscured. The bill requires that councils have particular regard for the contribution core services specified to make to their communities. We've heard debate in the House this morning, Mr. Speaker, and late last night, where people couldn't come to a conclusion over what core services might actually be. Well, members of the public don't seem to have any trouble any trouble determining what core services for a council should be. And so the bill requires that the council has particular regard. Again, it's a careful phrase, particular regard for the contribution core services specified that councils make to their communities. Those that suggest this list is rigid and restrictive must bear in mind that just because a council is required to have a particular regard for each of the core services, they're not obliged to deliver those services, and they're not obliged not to do anything else. Again, there is no great deal of compulsion here. Local authority could decide that certain services are not a priority in their community, or they were adequately provided for by other organisations. There's nothing preventing a local authority deciding a service is not listed as a priority, and as such providing those services. Probably the most contentious piece in this whole bill, Mr. Speaker, is the extended length of contracts for the operation and joint arrangements for the provision of water services from 15 to 35 years. Private partners will be allowed to provide and then own new infrastructure for a period of up to 35 years, after which it will be transferred to the council. The opposition have called this privatisation by stealth, but nothing could be further from the truth, as local government organisations will continue to be responsible for water quality, the provision and pricing of water services, and they do themselves no credit by creating an alarming situation and scenario to describe their fears. Local government organisations will regain ownership of all infrastructure associated with water services on the expiry of the contract. Mr. Speaker, in summary, this government has listened to the concerns of the local government sector, has been well advised by it, and has, oh yes we have, and has acted accordingly. We've increased flexibility. We have increased transparency and accountability, which in turn improve engagement and consultation with the communities. I feel sorry for those members on the other side of the House who wished it had done even more, but I am delighted to be part of a government that's making such huge improvements to local governments in New Zealand. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.